Good evening. Thank you to everyone for attending this meeting for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Thursday, the 25th of January 2024. My name is Councillor Aidy Riggott and I am the Chair of this committee. Please note this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. Members in the chamber, when you want to speak, please raise your hand to indicate to me that you wish to speak. When I invite you to speak, please turn your microphone on. Please turn your microphone off when you have finished speaking. Please can everyone ensure their phones are turned to silent. We are not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarms sound, please exit the way you came. Apologies.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And I know we have Councillor Martin and McGovern on Teams with us tonight too. Item 1, declarations of any interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda. If you have a pecuniary interest, you must withdraw from the meeting. Normally, you should leave the room before the business starts to be discussed. You do, however, have the same right to speak as a member of the public and may remain in the room to enable you to exercise that right and then leave immediately. In either case, you must not seek to improperly influence a decision on the matter. Item 2. Minutes of the meeting, Thursday the 5th of October 2023 of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, pages 3 to 8. Are there any issues to raise on the accuracy of the minutes, please? Thank you. The recommendation is that the minutes of the meeting be approved. Item 3, public questions. There are no public questions this evening. We now move on to the section for scrutiny of the Executive Cabinet. Item 4, Executive Cabinet minutes, pages 9 to 22. To consider the Executive Cabinet minutes from the meetings held on the 12th of October 2023, 9th of November 2023 and 12th of December 2023. I invite members to make any comments. Okay, no comments, thank you. Please can we note the Executive Cabinet minutes and that the report is noted. Item 5, notice of executive decisions. A link to the notice of decisions has been included on the agenda at item 5. I now invite members to make any comments on the notice of executive decisions.
I don't know if I should know the answer to this already or not, but page 53, the CCTV camera support award of contract, I think it says decision taken 7th of December 2023. I just wondered, has that been implemented now? Because I'm aware there were issues with supporting some of the CCTV provision in the borough, and we were told that we were changing or looking to change who was supporting our CCTV infrastructure. I just wondered if that decision was taken on the 7th of December. Is there a period of which when that new or that provider will start, or is that already kicked in? I'd just be interested to know that. Thanks.
Thank you. I note it's an exempt item, but is there anything you're able to say, Councillor Bradley, Councillor Wilson? Or is that something somebody needs to take a look at and get back? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, my understanding is the same as Councillor Snapes about that this was going to be a decision to be taken where obviously we'll look at who the provider is for the CCTV equipment, but in terms of the actual detail of what's happening, we'll have to go and find out and come back.
That's fine, thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Snape? Excellent, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you. We will now note the executive decisions are noted. Item 6, health scrutiny update. An update has been provided by Councillor Margaret France. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor France? I don't think a written report has been circulated.
I'll just forward it via Democratic Services.
But if you'd like to speak to it, then we can circulate it afterwards.
Okay, so since the last meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on October the 5th, I've attended meetings of the Health and Adult Services Scrutiny Committee on October the 25th, December the 4th and January the 12th. I'll give a brief summary below of the main substantive item of each one. For the sake of simplicity, we'd be here all night if we went into detail of everything. So October the 25th, this was a presentation by Louise Taylor on the NHS Lancashire Place update and future arrangements. So Louise Taylor gave a thorough overview of the emerging place arrangements for Lancashire and the role of the Health and Wellbeing Board within the new system. Members requested that all districts have representation within the governance arrangements, together with representatives from the VCFS organisations. There is still ongoing work and legal advice is being sought about the transition arrangements and also the future working models. So that's really very much a work in progress, but things are moving slowly. It's a major transformation, so it's not going to happen quickly. December the 4th, this was a meeting with senior ICB members, with Kevin Lavery, who is the Chief Exec, and Maggie Oldham, who is the Deputy Chief Exec of Lancashire and South Cumbria Integrated Care Board. So they were presenting their Recovery and Transformation Programme update. You may be aware that the ICB had an agreed carryover debt of £80 million for this financial year, but this figure is likely to be more in the region of £200 million. The financial situation may result in direct intervention by NHS England. So there were various discussions about how the financial situation could be improved, including amalgamating what were called fragile services. Now, the explanation to this was given that if, for instance, there's a unit, say a specialist stroke unit, and another one within 10 or 15 miles away, the feeling was if they weren't each seeing significant numbers coming through the door, that it was better to centralise and have one single unit. So it was bringing services together. Essentially as a cost-cutting exercise. And there also was discussion about repatriating of the highly specialist services which are currently outsourced. The type of thing like children's eating disorder inpatient provision, which I know we've had patients from the Chorley borough in that, and how it would be potentially possible to set up a unit within Lancashire and South Cumbria. But I made the point that, in fact, they were in danger of creating a fragile service there by not having enough people through the doors to make it sustainable. But hey-ho, I think the answer to that was they would look at the evidence available. And there was concern raised by members of the Scrutiny Committee about the lack of dental provision across Lancashire and how difficult it is to get an NHS dentist. So that was a good discussion, really, but I think it's watch this space in terms of the financial situation at year end. Now, the recent meeting, only this week, 22nd of January, Dr. Sakthi Karunanithy presented a service update on the Public Health, Wellbeing and Communities Service. He focused on 3 priorities: healthy hearts, collaborating with district councils on healthy weight approaches, happier minds, looking at a deep dive audit of suicides in 2022. We know that our suicide rate is higher than in other parts of the country. Working with colleagues to reduce the stigma of mental health. And then the best start in life. So from ages 0 to 19 or 25 years old for special educational needs. A new public health nursing service provider will be in place by April 2024. Okay, that's it, short and sweet.
Thank you, Councillor France. Does anybody have any questions? Yep.
Councillor France, the suicide rates.
The suicide rates were across Lancashire and South Cumbria. Were there any further breakdowns about whereabouts within the counties the rates were higher than others?
No, they weren't breaking it down, but we know from previous data that Chorley's had a particular issue with suicide risk as compared to other areas within Lancashire. Although I think it was the last set of figures I heard, it had improved, and there's been some recent suicide training. I don't know whether you went to that, Councillor Hayden, about emergency first aid for suicide or something. I can't remember what it was called, but that was quite useful just to tell people what's going on, and basically not to be afraid of talking to people about have they thought about suicide when they're feeling depressed, because a lot of people are frightened of saying that. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any further questions at this point? Okay, thank you, Councillor France, for your report, and we'll circulate the written report with the papers in due course. So, please can we note the update formally? Thank you. Item 7, draft budget 24-25, budget update, pages 55 to 70. 55 to 70. The Executive Member for Resources, Councillor Peter Wilson, is here with us again, and he will present this report. And Louise Mattison, the Director of Finance, is in attendance to assist. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as always, a pleasure to come to Overview and Scrutiny and present this year's draft budget. What you will see from the report that's provided, perhaps if we did a word search, the word that comes up a lot is uncertainty. And I think that underpins the world of local government at the minute. It certainly does in Chorley. And I think in the past, we've always lurched from these one-year settlements where they come out on the 19th or 20th of December, and then we have to then work very, very hard in that interim period to prepare our budget. But normally, Chair, it is fair to say that we do get projections for future years, which helps set the medium-term financial strategy. And as it says in the report, unfortunately, those projections haven't been forthcoming, and therefore it's made it very, very difficult. So for the officers to my left, as I think I said at Cabinet last week, setting the medium-term financial strategy is a bit like driving a car with only a rear-view mirror as an aid, when you can't see where you're going forward. So it is very, very difficult. It makes life very, very complex in terms of setting your medium-term financial strategy. It is unfortunately the world in which we're in. That's nothing we can do about it. It is the way it is. But what it does do is, as it outlines in the reports, is it makes it, as I say, a certain uncertain future. So what we can do is look at what we've got for this year and what we know and what we prepare to do for the forthcoming financial year and the one after in up to 25-26. So the report outlines all the measures that were taken in the budget, but just as a starter, actually, if we go to scroll down a little to page 64 on the agenda pack, we can see a table there which tells us where the position was in February of 2023 when we set the budget for 23-24, and you can see there that we projected a deficit this year of £537,000, and then that going up to 1.4 or nearly £1.5 million for 25-26. So the challenge has been how to obviously bridge that gap, and the report does look at a number of items and a number of ways in which we've aimed to do that. So it's clearly, as always, the council pushes for efficiencies and savings internally, and some of those have been realised. But the big cost pressures in the past 12 months and still now going forward are obviously utility costs. We've seen the big increases in utility costs. Hopefully they will go down in the future, but as we stand here today, we've not had those benefits yet. So obviously we're still dealing with those significant costs if we compare it to where we were just over 12 months ago. And the other big increase in cost is staffing costs as well. And again, it's outlined in the report there that we've had the pay agreement, the pay award, which was last year of £1,900 or just over £1,900 as a flat rate. And then anticipations for this year, although not set yet, but anticipations in the region of about 5%. So clearly they were additional costs that, again, going back in time, weren't to be anticipated. So that's the context, the shortfall that I outlined and those additional cost pressures. So what we're proposing this year as a means of dealing with that, with those pressures, is an increase in council tax of 2.99%. So that is the maximum that we can increase council tax without a referendum to seek approval for further. So that is being proposed for this year. As it says in the report, that equates, when you look at Chorley's element of your council tax bill, which is about 11% of what we take in council tax, that equates to about 10p a week for an average Band D property. So we never like increasing council tax. I always make that point when we do have to increase, it's because we have to, not because we want to. But I hope that the rise is a manageable amount for residents across the borough, although there are always people who might face particular problems, but a manageable amount, but it brings in valuable income to the council. But the point I'd like to underline there to members when we look at council taxes, if we look at the table that's provided on council tax, when we compare ourselves across Lancashire, we can see there on page 58, the table shows that Chorley is the second lowest council tax rate when we look at the average Band D. It's the second lowest in Lancashire. And I think that's something that as administration we should be proud of, that we managed to keep council tax down. At the same time, we managed to invest in frontline services. And what I'm very pleased with is, despite all those issues that I raised at the start about the financial pressures and the uncertainty of the future, is that we're not coming with proposed cuts. We're managing to continue with our investment programmes. We're managing to build on what we did last year on those key areas, whether it's housing, local communities, jobs and investments, or the environment and clean air. So it's important that we can build on what we've done. It's important that we can deliver on the priorities that we all voted for in the corporate strategy of November last year. And that's what this report outlines there. And it gives us the figures of what's going to be included if we go through pages. Well, from page 60 onwards, we can see what was done last year, and then we can see what we're planning to do for this year. And we can see some significant investments there, whether it's in things like social prescribing, which is dealing with some of the people with more complex needs, or whether it's investing again in terms of environment or health and well-being. There's a range of packages there. So we believe the budget builds on our previous success and our previous work. It will continue to make sure that we're hopefully investing where we believe the residents want to see money invested and want to see their taxpayers' money directed. And also, Chair, I would mention this significant point is that we have, over the course of the last 11 years, sought to find our own income streams. And we can see there outlined on page 58 the amounts of money that these income streams bring into the council on an annual basis. And it is significant. If I do a quick total there, it comes to about £2.3 million. And through that work, through that, some of those bold decisions that had to be taken, that allows us, despite the challenging financial climate, to continue with the work that we do and to continue to deliver on behalf of residents. So I think it's important to highlight that, because that's, again, a key fundamental pillar of what this council and what this administration's policies have been built on. It's fundamental to the fact that we can continue to support, as I say, people in the communities and keep council tax down, although I accept there is a 3% rise, but keep it low, as I say, when we compare it to other areas in Lancashire. So going forward, Chair, the other part of the report highlights the challenge for not this financial year, but the next financial year. Clearly, there is a lot of unknown elements to that. As I said, there are unknowns in terms of what the funding will be. Maybe a change of government that may or may not bring different emphasis in terms of what local government's about and what it provides and what funding it gets. It may not. We just don't know. But the reality is, for 25-26, we're looking at a deficit of £1.5 million. So we've got to plan how we're going to bridge that gap, and we're going to build on the work that we've already done in terms of income generation. We've got to build on the work we do in terms of efficiency savings, and we've also got to look at the way we do business across the organisation. And again, look how we can try and actually ensure that while the costs are kept as low as they can be, the services are maintained and the budget is balanced. So that is the priority for the future, of course, and it's going to be a challenge, but that's what we aim to do, and that's what we're consulting on. So as members will be aware, the consultation is seeking views from the public. That's out there now. Hopefully we'll get people engaging in that process, irrespective of the views, as long as they engage in the process. And we will then come back to council accordingly. And I think at that point, Chair, I shall pause there.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for that comprehensive summary. Are there any questions, members? I'm sure. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, and thank you for that comprehensive review of the paper. Just one key for me, I think it's welcome that the percentage increase in council tax is as low as it is, but it is still an increase for people, and people are struggling now. So I know on point 19 it talks about the council having a commitment to support families that are struggling, and I just wondered if we could have clarification of the systems that we've got in place to identify those families, and do we think that's robust enough given the current climate?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Councillor Brown. It's interesting because there are a number of schemes there. So there's the hardship fund, the council tax support scheme. I had these on the tip of my tongue last week because I had to do a radio interview on them, so I've already forgotten at least two of them. There is the ability where we can actually instigate a 60-day pause in people. If people are being chased for bills, we can actually sort of say, look, that's a pause. I can't remember the title of that scheme. Jennifer will actually know, I'm sure, because she's far more up on these things than I am. So there are measures where we can help people who are facing a crisis, where they're actually facing debts, and maybe the council tax bill is one of those problems in terms of paying. What we've sought to do is not resort to bailiffs and the usual enforcement. We've actually sought to intervene early, whether that's doing payment plans, but also not more than just payment plans and looking at how they pay the council tax. What we now do is say, well, what else is going on in your life, basically, and what other pressures are you facing? You could be under stress, strain at home, family, etc. If that is the case, people can refer into the social prescribing, and I mentioned that's an area where we're investing more money. And again, that looks at a more holistic approach, as it were, because that's working with GPs or mental health authorities, etc., to try and actually look at how you support people in the home, with the families, and with the finances and financial planning as well. So I would argue, I think we've got a very, very broad package of ways in which we support that take us beyond, and this is what we aim to do, is to go beyond the simple issue of, there's your council tax bill, you haven't paid it, here's your letter with a big red ink saying you've got so many days to pay. Those days have gone. What we do is we still have occasions where you do have to go to an enforcement agent, because there are certain people who perhaps will always play the system, if I'm being honest. But where people are genuinely struggling, as I say, we've got the council tax support scheme, we've got the hardship fund, we've got the ability, as I say, to pause people's debts, to give them the breathing space for 2 months to put their finances in order, and we've got the social prescribing team as well. So I'm sure, like everything, we can do more, but I do think we do quite a bit to help those who are struggling. And I've probably missed a couple of schemes off there because that's just off the top of my head. So as I say, whether Councillor Murray or Jennifer knows more or would like to add more, I'm sure they can do.
Thank you. Any further questions? Anybody? Okay, I had a couple. Sorry, you put your hand up? No, sorry, I wasn't sure. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for the summary. I think, like you, I imagine most thoughts are to the future uncertainty and resolving that rather large budget gap that we have. And I just wondered, when you talked about the utility costs, how comfortable are we that we now have a handle on what the utility costs are likely to be, given the demand, given the fact that we still have the leisure centres and we're trying to get that in a more balanced position? Do we feel like we've fully captured that? And the other areas, kind of similar related questions, were, given obviously the large gap we have to address, do you foresee any challenges with the deliverability of the recently acquired asset that we discussed at council, or the levelling up scheme, which would require financial support, I imagine, for both projects?
Taking the first point, which I've just completely forgotten.
Energy cost legislation.
Energy costs, sorry. That's happening more to me, that chair, actually. I sort of get my phone out to look at something on Google, and by the time I've put my code in, I forget what it was I was searching. Age. So energy costs. I think we are happier now in terms of knowing what the costs are and what we're facing as in today and what's gone. I think that's sort of we've got that, a handle on that. The issue of what's to come, one can only say that we are hoping it's going to go down. Now, everything says it's going to go down, and we're told it's going to go down, and we're told domestic bills are going to go down. I only read yesterday that bills are going to go down by £300 or more. However, until that's happened, it's very difficult to project, because there is that uncertainty. And don't forget, while support for domestic users stayed in place, of course, it was taken away from other organisations. So I suppose, again, to perhaps answer the question in another way, it also depends on whether there's any other hidden. I don't think there will be. I don't think there's anything else hidden. I think we've been paying the full bill, as it were. So I don't think there's anything more they can do to us, as it were, in that sense, to make it worse. So I don't think we're going to get any worse. I'd like it to go down, but unfortunately, the world in which we live, prices go up a lot. and they come down a little. Because we get used to paying the higher bill, we always think it's great when they come down a bit. But the reality is we're still paying a lot more than we were 12 months ago or 24 months ago. In terms of the projects, no, is the honest. No, I don't see the financial challenge of the future stopping us doing what we can with that money and with those projects, because obviously we've got the money in terms of the levelling up bid. That 20 million is there. What we have to work out is what we put in with that and how we stretch every pound of that to its maximum value. So I don't think we're in a position, perhaps I could say if things were better, we could throw more on top or more with it, you know, things like that. So I suppose you could say it's restricted there, but no, does it mean those schemes are sort of in jeopardy or we can't deliver? No.
Thank you. And I suppose, unless there's any further questions, I suppose a final comment from me, as is always, if there's any areas you wish scrutiny to look at to help bridge that gap, feel free yourself or the portfolio holders to make a suggestion and we can factor that in.
Thanks for that, Chair. I think over the next, certainly the next 12 months, I think there's going to be obviously a necessity to look at nearly all areas of what the council does in terms of, you know, and the cost involved and how we can reduce those costs and or raise revenue. So it may be on a number of occasions, it'd be very useful actually to have a more in-depth look or to have a review or, you know, through scrutiny. But as we haven't even started those discussions about where we're looking, obviously I can't give you any specifics, but I'm sure scrutiny will have a role in that.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So we are now at the end of the discussion on this item, and please can we note the report? Thank you. Is that your last item, Councillor Wilson? No. Of course, you're entitled to stay or to do something else with your evening. Choice is yours.
As much as I admire listening to the leader, I'll leave him to it.
I'm just pleased we've got the leader here. Item 8, Youth Diversionary and Outreach Services. Agenda supplement, pages 5 to 12. The Executive Member for Early Intervention, Councillor Bev Murray, is to present this report, and Jennifer Mullin, Director of Communities, is in attendance to assist. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as members will be well aware, youth services are the responsibility of the upper tier authority, not districts. Lancashire County Council offer youth services by the Children and Family Wellbeing Detached Services, which provides information on universal services and community-based provision, and operates out of the Lord Street Community Centre at certain times with 4 outreach sessions. In addition to this, the County Council has a Lancashire Violence Reduction Network, which has an app which provides information on what's happening locally, but that doesn't do any outreach. However, Chorley Council recognise the value of working in partnership across all sections of society, so the Council does support youth provision across the borough. This allows the Council to be aware of young people and families who could be struggling, as well as trying to reduce antisocial behaviour in some areas. As members will be aware, the Council contributes to the funding of Inspire Youth Zone and the detached outreach work programmes. The outreach takes into considerations referrals and intelligence from local partners and counsellors and allows youth workers to engage with people who do not attend the youth centres. The most recent information from April to December is summarised on page 6 about where the outreach is and the numbers attending. I should also mention at this point there is some flexibility to move the resource around. So if there's a particular problem in one area and the other areas are quite quiet, then resources are moved after discussion. The public protection team are also involved in some youth work where there have been issues with some antisocial behaviour. They work with organisations to deliver diversionary activities. Most recently, you may have heard of Operation Sunshine, which was with the police and funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner. So, in summary, Chorley Council works in partnership with various organisations and are always on the lookout to encourage programmes into the borough, an example of which is the Preston North End Community Trust, which works at Clayton. So, I don't want to go any more in the report because everyone's already read it, I'm sure. but just also to note that some of the neighbourhood priorities have involved youth work. Most recently, the Adlington one started a youth group. Councillor Snape was involved in that one. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I'll now invite members to make any comments. Councillor Snape.
I'm just trying to think of the way I phrase it, but obviously the council puts quite significant investment into, I think it says here, Chorley, on paragraph 10, Chorley Council has funded Inspire Youth Zone detached and outreach programme. Obviously, there are areas of the borough that are fundraising through other sources and grants and things to try and get additional outreach activity into their area on a more sustained, because I'm aware that the Inspire model is 12 weeks, so they go to an area for 12 weeks and then try and get people involved in the youth zone and then kind of pull out and go to another area and hit an area and so on. But I'm just wondering how those areas that are fundraising to get a more sustained level of outreach work, how do they then get the benefit of the Chorley Council funding if they're going sort of asking businesses for sponsorship and things like that and other grant bodies? It just seems a little bit, and I know obviously there's an example in Adlington, there'll be other parts of the borough, but if community groups are setting up to try and get a more sustained offer from Inspire, but then the council is putting in a significant amount of money, but then those areas aren't seeing the benefit of it because that they're doing things themselves, or they're going with a begging pot to businesses and grants and basically having to scrape the barrel to find money from places. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, really, because I mean, on a personal level, I don't feel that those areas are seeing the benefit from the money from the outreach activity that the council's paying for.
Well, I'd say a couple of things, really. Yes, we do fund Inspire and we do the outreach work. And as I said in the report, that it's based on need and where there are issues. Where Inspire do the other stuff outside the funding that we give them is up to them, because they do operate we're not in charge of them. Although we fund them and we do work with them, we are not in charge of them. So when you comment about businesses in local areas, it will be up to Inspire to say, well, I don't know, this business is from Exton, so they should be funding some outreach in Exton. If that's what you're driving at, then that would be a decision for Inspire, not the council. Council is more than happy to help facilitate starting up groups and helping them find sustainability. But I think we also need to remember that youth work and youth workers are specially trained, and it is a skilled profession. And for us to come in and run it with our community officers, although they are very good, they don't necessarily have the skills and expertise you need to engage with youth, the young people, and to take those issues on board and move forward.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Platt?
Hi. It was some time ago, before I took a small sabbatical, I'd asked whether we could find out when activities were happening in our area, just so we could have a heads up. Because you see the figures on the paper and you think, well, I haven't seen them. But then again, I'm not 16 or 14 anymore. So, of course, I wouldn't see them. But it's just, I don't know, it's just like they sneak in and they sneak out. They don't, but we'd never know about it. And then we see it in a report that possibly they've been in our area 6 times or 10 times or not at all, which make complete sense if you've not seen them. But we just don't get a heads up or a programme even. And obviously I lost touch when I was away, whether that actually happened.
Well, I could certainly look into it for you. I do know Inspire go into schools and they're quite active on social media, but I don't see any reason why we can't ask them to advertise where they're going. And actually, maybe we could put it out in the know when they're going into certain areas.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, Councillor Lees?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is very broad on antisocial behaviour. Now, there's different forms of antisocial behaviour. Either, young children going around Chorley, throwing things about. Their range is what, 8 to 12, that kind of age group. And then once you get over 12 and 14, you come into a different kind of antisocial behaviour, like youth congregating, in places and causing a nuisance. Those kind of people or youths don't really want organised entertainment, So have we got a broad number of figures relating to each party, or is it all mangled into one with regarding antisocial behaviour?
I'm not quite sure I'm with you on that, Roy.
Right, I mean, we're
Go on.
looking at we talk about outreach going out,
Yeah.
but they're dealing with children, up to 12 years old? Or are they
16,
dealing with
up to
15,
16.
16-year-olds?
My understanding it's up to 16.
And what kind of response are we getting? Because you're going to get a different response from 10 to 12 as you are 6 to 15, 16.
Of why they don't go into the centres?
Why do what, sorry?
Are you asking why they don't go into the centre? Is that what you mean?
No, I was looking at antisocial behaviour generally, not necessarily in the centre of town, or going to like Inspire.
I think Alistair understands what you mean. Sorry. But what I would say is I think it does mention about antisocial behaviour in this, but I think we do need to be clear that not all antisocial behaviour is done by young people either.
No.
It is across all age groups. And although we do try and address antisocial behaviour, ultimately, there is a policing responsibility for it as well. And we shouldn't forget that either.
Could I add to that point, Chair? To assist, of course. The interface with young people up to 16 and up to older 19, 20 for people with special needs and special requirements. So there is a programme now. Some of the programmes are aimed at younger children, at 8, 10, 12-year-olds, but some are aimed at the 12 to 16-year-old group. They are, as you say, probably less of activity based. They're more around mentoring. They're more around actually getting them involved in sometimes mentoring the younger young people as well, because that's a good life skill that you can start to lead activities, and that's what they do a lot of, and develop those people's self-confidence and actions like that. So sometimes you'll find that the older young people, the teenagers, are the ones leading some of the sessions for the younger ones, and that's quite rewarding. It helps develop some of the job skills they might need as well, because having to work and interface with the people. It's about organisation. They lead craft classes and all that kind of stuff. So they actually become some of the, and that's a staging post, and they develop themselves as individuals that way. But there are programmes deliberately aimed, and some of the things around the food ban and things that they do, which they use specifically to attract those teenagers, because as we all know, teenagers are always hungry and they can eat you out of house and home, is aimed at that. So if you actually go there, it's geared up to attract that age group with the kind of things they want to eat. So they are experts at what they do. And I'll admit the link. I mean, some of the numbers we've been provided as to what the county council are providing across the whole of Chorley is roughly 24 sessions per month, of which a third are in the two villages, Adlington and Coppell, and the rest is in Lord Street, in one part of Chorley. The youth zone, through the funding that we provide to it, provide upwards, if you include the actual main hub itself, 160, 180 sessions a month. It's 5 or 6 times that number of sessions, and therefore they are doing a dramatic amount of stuff based on the numbers that you can see here in this report. And there will be lots and lots of different sessions aimed at lots and lots of different profiles of people. And some of those sessions are aimed at getting young people into work as well, even though the young people might not realise it's about getting them into work at a point in time. But if you go to any of the events, and I think you probably did it when you were mayor, Roy, at the youth zone itself and the outreach sessions, you will be quite inspired is the right word, by the fact that there are some amazing stories in there. But by the same token, there are a number of young people who don't engage and don't want to engage, or get switched off at certain times. So it's about constantly changing, constantly evolving, And that's why, going back to Councillor Platt's point about advertising, it's very much a time led by the schools, because when they go into the schools, they identify the gaps. Because some schools do a lot of pastoral care, they do a lot of outside activities, they do a lot of engagement around the school, but then they also identify those young people who aren't engaging around the school and point out the ones who they think are potentially going down an ASB route and say you might want to intervene here. But also echoing Councillor Murray's point, if ASB is taking place, then that's really a police and a matter that we'll probably discuss later on under the next item further on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on Inspire, and the work they do is tremendous. And obviously other things like football clubs, which tend to deal with up to 12-year-olds. After that, there don't seem to be many teams from, say, 15, 16 in a competitive nature. So we tend to lose children like that, and they tend to go off. What kind of...
Again, Chair, through you, just to correct that fallacy, there is an increasing number of open age teams. So it used to be in the old days that junior football clubs stopped at 16 because young people became disengaged. But you will find at least 4, if not 5 clubs now around Chorley running what they call open age teams, which is when they get to 16 or 18, it tends to be 18, that they move into almost adults, particularly football, but also I'm aware of it in netball and others, where they are consciously trying to retain. And that's one of the functions of the fact that young people at that age are no longer welcoming public houses and all the rest of it. Yeah, you have to prove your age now, and lots of places have 21 cards and all that. So where does a young person between 16 and 18 go? So a lot of them actually want to go into positive diversions, whether that's sport or other activities, with organisations that cater for them. So again, my own experience through junior football is there's a big pressure now and a lot of clubs are now running that arrangement because the young people are available, whereas in the past they would have dispersed into perhaps more adult activities because there's an extension on for young people. So I think it used to be the case that there wasn't that provision. I think there is more of that provision, and it's certainly something that you saw and us as a council are supporting, and we do that via a number of different routes.
I think basically what I'm getting to, is like when they get to a certain age, they start hanging about on playground areas and things like causing disturbance. How are we getting out to those people? That kind of antisocial behaviour.
Well, in the report, it lists where the outreach teams go, and they go into that sort of area.
Yeah.
And try to engage with kids, but just Harper's Lane and Buttermere in York.
Yeah.
But just because kids are hanging round on a playground doesn't mean to say they're causing any problems.
No, I know.
Do you know what I mean?
To the resident.
And to the resident, I acknowledge to the residents it can be quite intimidating, but sometimes they're just hanging around and not causing any issues.
I appreciate that.
Now, this is why there's some flexibility in built into the outreach. So if there is kids hanging around in a specific area causing a problem, then the outreach team will move to that area where perhaps it's quieter. It will be left and the resources will be moved to where the problems are. So we do have some flexibility in the system. But I think we need to acknowledge as well, though, that some kids just won't engage. And that is just fact. And some kids will do everything, some kids will do nothing, some kids don't want to do anything, and some kids just want to sit on a swing and not cause any problems for anybody.
So that will apply to 8 to 12-year-olds as well, will it?
Yeah. Well, I think it applies to everybody, all age groups. Some people want to get involved in everything, some people are happy to sit back. And, it's individual choice, isn't it? But I do think there's not a danger, but I think sometimes we do see young people and think immediately they're causing a problem when perhaps they're not. And I appreciate it can be intimidating.
Thank you for a persistent line of questioning there, Councillor Lees, and for your responses, Councillor Murray, Councillor Bradley. Yes. And I think that reinforces the need for why we wanted clarity about the papers, and it generated a good discussion, which I think was hopefully helpful. I think my other reflections on the papers, where it's kind of been alluded to a little bit, was just how members can be engaged a little bit more in the process of either if we can encourage Inspire to share where either they're going or where they've been, because sometimes these need handling sensitive, as you know, and you don't want 6 councillors turning up and intimidating any work they're trying to do. I think it'd be just helpful sometimes when you're challenged to be able to say they never do anything. Well, actually, I know they came 3 weeks ago and they focused on this area. I think that would be helpful. And my only question was regarding, I think it's paragraph 24, bottom of page 7, where this is the Lancashire County Council outreach work that is done in Adlington and Coppell. Does this council have any influence over those areas, or over where that work is focused, or if we did, would we seek to change that?
My understanding is the county council just operate as they operate, basically without, I know I was speaking to Bernie actually before, and he says that he does try to engage with them on various levels, but he does find it quite difficult at times. And I believe there's issues with staffing as well in the youth.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Snape?
I was going to say, just following on from Deborah's point and your point about member engagement with it. I know Inspire are doing a big drive on volunteering, so the mentoring and the wider volunteers for, the bits in Adlington and other parts of the work that they do, because I know they've had problems with staffing like anywhere else. But I just wondered whether or not there could be more of there doesn't seem to be a strategy for feeding that through to the council or to members either, in terms of what volunteer roles they're short of and what volunteer, things that they might be after in particular parts of the district, or, I know they were on about this mentoring scheme, and I said, have you approached people like, such a business in Adlington and such a person? They said, oh no, we've not thought of that. So there just doesn't seem to be, they seem to be doing some really good volunteer focused projects, but they could be using people's councillors' knowledge and insights about different villages and parts of the borough, couldn't they, if they spoke to people a bit more. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem feeding that back whatsoever.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Murray, Councillor Bradley, for... Oh, sorry. Can you imagine how much trouble I'm in now?
Just following on from that, when you do the interactions with the schools, you have it's not called election day, it's called democracy day. Well, obviously, when they leave school, you could do something similar to that inside Inspire. Get a couple of councillors down, and they could just basically say, "Why'd you do it? What experience do you have? That type of thing," and just sort of put a few councillors on the spot a little bit. But for the older people, for the older kids, rather than the ones at school, because obviously they're all contained in school and it's all choreographed, but it's a little less prescriptive when you probably get a bunch of people in a room and say, there you go, ask them people some questions about why they do it, why are they borough councillors. It just might be quite interesting to some, not obviously all of them.
I think that's an excellent idea. It's up to you to answer, Councillor Murray, and I would encourage leadership from the top.
Yeah, well, more than happy to go along. But my understanding is that they liaise with the education department at Parliament, and they have there's an education team based in the northwest that come out and they teach about democracy, and they have debates and talk about leadership roles and things like that. I think that happens quite regularly.
How could I say no, Councillor?
Just on that, last year, the Electoral Commission had their annual general meeting here in this very room, and they invited the youth zone and others to come and explain about their view on voting and their view on democracy. So the youth zone brought a collection of young people and a collection of their workers who sat up on that, where you're all sat at the front there, and told the people here how disengaged they were with democracy and what's the point, and you should be doing it through TikTok and all that kind of stuff. It was very interesting. I think it was very interesting from both sides, and therefore there is probably some way they could do that kind of work because they got in. So it was quite interesting though that most of the leaders who came were more disengaged than the young people who came. So that perhaps explains our problem. But yeah, I think they'd be up for doing that, as would you know, the likes of the colleges and what have you. But they tend to be more of an engaged population in the colleges.
Especially when you've got some younger members as well. You know, I'm looking at one now, but I think they maybe have this impression that we're all old and grey. But it's not. It's for everyone. It's from 18 to whatever. It's not just anybody past a certain age. So that might be interesting.
Yeah, Councillor Collins was engaged in that session, and I think he, like I, found it very interesting, the perceptions that were not probably correct from the young people and from us about them. And back to Councillor Leesy's point about what they're doing hanging around. So yeah, but lots of things. So.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for a really great discussion. Can we note the report and move to the next item? Thank you. Item 9, reports from task and finish groups, overview and scrutiny task group, recruitment and staff retention. Final report, see main agenda pack pages 71 to 102. The chair of the task group, Councillor Beach, will present this report.
Good evening, thank you, Chair. My name is Councillor Michelle Beach and I was appointed as chair of this task group, and to my left, Councillor Ryan Tyers was appointed as vice chair. The task group was set up in September 2023 and we held 5 meetings from the period of September to December last year. The aim of this review was to identify any underlying issues that there were in relation to recruitment and staff retention, and if any, to address them, ensuring that the council has an excellent workforce, providing quality services to residents and a reputation as a good employer. As referenced in the background and context on page 6 of the report, it had been noted that at some meetings of the Overview and Scrutiny Performance Panel, some heads of service had cited lack of staffing as an issue affecting performance. As part of this review, the members of the task group wanted to investigate in more depth whether recruitment and staff retention was impacting on service delivery or if there are any wider issues to consider. The task group kept this in mind throughout the course of the review. It was highlighted early in the scoping of the review that members should focus on the strategic and policy aspects of recruitment and staff retention, which were in the remit of councillors, rather than the operational issues which fall under the Chief Executive. Information on their respective roles was sought to establish this distinction and provide clarification for members. As you will see from the report, the task group was very thorough, gathering documentary evidence from a range of sources and interviewing key stakeholders, including Holly Walmsley, the Head of Human Resources, the Unison Branch Secretary Leslie Miller, survey responses from the senior management team and the Executive Member for Resources. Before I go to give the recommendations of the task group, I would like to reiterate what the task group concluded. The task group is satisfied that the new recruitment strategy is tackling the issues identified within the report. The service delivery is being maintained, however, it should be highlighted that there are challenges in certain areas as identified during the course of the review. The exec members and directors had hold heads of service to account where on occasion performance gaps are being attributed to the lack of staffing when there are other identifiable reasons. And the task group recognises that the dedication of all its employees and would like to thank them for their hard work. The recommendations are outlined on page 4 of the report, and these are that the council's senior management team be requested to investigate the feasibility of the council working towards the living wage accreditation and, if promising, present their proposals to Exec Cabinet. That the council actively promotes health and well-being to include mental health, support available as part of its overall employee benefits package. That the Executive Member for Resources monitor recruitment and retention figures over the next 6 to 12 months, especially in identified key risk areas. That a member learning session be arranged on an annual basis to update on workforce planning. And finally, to include performance reporting data on recruitment and staff retention on the new members portal from the new recruitment system. I would like to thank members of the task group who worked very well together, progressing the review effectively and efficiently. I would also like to thank officers involved in the review, including Holly Walmsley, Head of Human Resources, and Claire Garnell, Democratic and Member Services Officer, for their time and support. I'd also like to thank my Vice Chair for his support going on. And I have been asked by the task group for it to be formally recorded, the thanks to Claire, because it's been mentioned that this is one of the most well-written reports that they have received as a task group in a very long time. So Claire, please take our thanks and gratitude for all your hard work. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beach, and I think we all echo the thanks that the long list you've just given without having to repeat them. And I noticed it was a really well-attended group, a lot of members, because that's not always the case, which I think goes to your leadership style too. Open to any questions? I know many people in this room are part of the task group. Councillor Brown?
Thank you. I think it's a fantastic report, actually. I think it's really detailed and it covers, as I was reading through it, it was answering the questions that I had, which is always a good sign. One of the things I wondered, though, about some of these solutions around the objectives, it mentions the potential for apprentices, and given where we are with unemployment in the area, etc., I just wonder if there's a specific apprenticeship strategy, whether it was discussed around maybe strengthening that, if there are options there.
Chair, I'm okay to take this. There's been a huge increase in apprentices in the council. They've moved to taking on 18, which I think is a positive step. Listening to the strategy and the plan of how to develop these apprenticeships into roles throughout the council was something that looked as a positive step as well. Some of the things around making sure they've got a dedicated training officer to ensure that those apprentices get the proper training that they needed. Also, they work with Runshaw College, and just to ensure that as part of that apprenticeship scheme, that they're allotted the 20% training time within their work time, so they're able to kind of pick up the skills that they needed, instead of what you do see in some employers where it's almost kind of cannon fodder, where they're just shoved in to do the quick work, easy work, and long hours. So it was positive to hear that there'd been an assessment of those apprenticeship roles, and that the time needed to do the studying for the apprentices to develop was going to be in place. There were a few concerns, and this was raised by the Unison secretary, around not always achieving that 20% training time previously, but the council had identified this, and that's where the employment of a training officer, just to make sure that they keep on top of it all the time. And I felt quite confident from the explanation that was being tackled before it was raised at the overview and scrutiny panel. It had already been talked about with the Unison branch secretary and engaged with. So it's quite positive that they were proactive. Although we highlighted it, it was something that was already kind of ongoing. So my kind of appraisal of it was that they've highlighted a few issues, they'd looked at them and looked at a solution, and I was quite happy with it.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, anybody? Right, Councillor Bradley was going to put his hand up then, but didn't say I was going to call you, I just thought you were going to put your hand up. Now, at the end of the discussion, I'd like to again echo those thanks, and can we note the report and agree that the report to be recommended to Executive Cabinet? Thank you. Thank you both. Well done. Just before we move to the next item, I'd just like to draw everybody's attention to our next task group, which is Suicide Prevention and Bereavement Overview and Scrutiny Task Group. That work is going to now commence. If you wish to be a member, the first meeting will be scheduled as soon as possible. If you're interested, please let the relevant officers know. This was a suggestion brought to us by Councillor Martin at the work group planning session. Thank you. Item 10, Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme. Main agenda pack, pages 103 to 104. Please see the work programme that is attached. As Chair, I have a couple of amendments that I would like to add to the work programme, which I will read out. Number 1, that the Community Safety Partnership Update Report be considered on the 14th of March 2024. And number 2, that arising from a discussion on special expenses at the Overview and Scrutiny Performance Panel on the 23rd of November 2023, an update be provided on the outcome of that review as part of the Quarter 3 Performance Monitoring Report at the next panel meeting on the 7th of March 2024. Are the committee happy to approve these amendments and the work programme as listed? Thank you. Item 11, any urgent business previously agreed with the chair? I can confirm there are no urgent items. Please can we now move on to the final item on the agenda? If you would like to. Okay, that's fine, thank you. Item 12, Town Centre Action Plan Update. The Executive Member Early Intervention, Councillor Bev Murray, is to present this report. Jennifer Mullen, Director of Communities, is in attendance to assist. Please note the main report is to be considered in the public domain. The appendix to the report contains restricted information relating to a pending court prosecution. Members must resolve to exclude the public and press if they wish to discuss matters in the appendix. Up to you, Councillor Murray.
Actually, Councillor Bradley's going to do this one.
Through you, Chair, she subcontracted this element of the reporting for very good reasons, because as we saw earlier, Councillor Murray does the youth engagement and all the nice, pleasant stuff. But for my sins, I tend to pick up the town centre, and therefore I'm more aware of the antisocial behaviour issues and the action plan that Jennifer and I have worked very closely on, including right up to this afternoon. So it's still going on. So it's a constantly evolving picture, and I'll take you through that. So, but I'm sure Bev can assist where required. The report outlines that obviously antisocial behaviour is a major issue. Going back to Councillor Leesy's point earlier, for this council, it was detailed in the most recent strategic reports and the Lancashire Talking Survey. It's one of our priorities in our Community Safety Partnership Action Plan, because, as Councillor Lees quite correctly identified, it's one of the things that people are very aware of, and they see probably more than they see of crime as a major crime. You tend not to see it. Major crime happens by criminals elsewhere, but antisocial behaviour is particularly prevalent in our town centre. But actually, the wards that are worst affected are Chorley South East, which is my own and Councillor Murray's ward, Chorley South West, and Chorley North East. But Chorley North West covers the bulk of the town centre, and the town centre has its own unique problems due to the fact that it's seen as a centre for everything, and particularly antisocial behaviour. There is a graph at paragraph 8 that shows crime and disorder, because they're linked together, where that's recorded by the police, which shows a rise in 2021, and then it's plateaued, if you like, since then and stayed fairly steady, which is disappointing. We've done a lot of work to reduce it, but it is what it is, so we have to deal with it. And it also identifies in paragraph 9 the fact that antisocial behaviour, if you like, is 40% of that problem, and the outcomes over that 3-year period, and is therefore quite a significant part of that. And it also identifies that it's particularly unreasonable because it affects visitors, residents, business operators, and it affects their livelihood and well-being in the town centre. So we have a number of businesses who are very affected by this, and therefore are very concerned about that. And over the last 12 months, the police have had to use what they call exceptional powers, which is a Section 34 dispersal order in our town centre to basically clear the streets and create a situation where everybody's off the streets, because they've just got, if you like, not overrun, but a problem that is too big to deal with the individuals concerned, and therefore everybody's affected by that. And I witnessed one of those, and they are, at times, they have been needed. And there's a lot of negative social media about this, and media about this. And there was quite a high-profile case last year on the BBC in Astley Park, which is obviously at the edge of the town centre, of problems with youth violence. So lots of issues going on. It's not just down to us to sort out. It is a multi-agency approach, because there is an issue with the police, obviously, but lots of other agencies as well, and particularly the community as well. But the prominent issues, as it says in paragraph 13, are around youth-related antisocial behaviour, hanging about, to quote Councillor Lees, and also what then ensues from that hanging about. Shoplifting is a particularly antisocial behaviour problem at the moment across the whole country. Begging, similarly, although begging is quite low in Chorley comparative to other areas, and also antisocial behaviour in terms of supported living accommodation, i.e. antisocial behaviour to the neighbours and residents of the streets where those supported living accommodation have been imposed on us, quite often by outside agencies. So I'm probably going to talk about, first of all, youth and social behaviour in the town centre, which has triggered some of the Section 34 dispersal notices, and it does cause a lot of alarm and distress. It identifies the various hotspots, and you will not be surprised to know, and I think this is a common across Lancashire, because I went to a police presentation about antisocial behaviour across Lancashire. McDonald's features on every single town's list of antisocial behaviour hotspots. Sorry about that, but that's what it does. Chapel Street is a particular problem for Chorley because it's where the bus interchange is. There are a number of fast food takeaways, and it's very central, it's very visible, and it's where the youth zone is as well. So for some reason, youths excluded from the youth zone, or youth who don't want to engage in the youth zone, like hanging around near the youth zone. I don't know why, they don't know why, but they do. Okay, so that's what happens. And then also in the escape lounge and real cinema corridor, let's call it the corridor between Market Walk, the old bit and the new bit, that again seems to be a problem area, possibly because of the attraction of bright lights and lots of people about around, and also the fact that those venues have a ground floor entry point, which isn't part of the main building, which is perhaps in hindsight a design issue, which we are seeking to address, and certainly Real have already addressed it. So it identifies that obviously about what I said about shoplifting and theft, that is very much a problem that a lot of businesses are experiencing, and we are working with the police and those businesses to address that. But it's a problem that's national, and there have been some recent advice given by the police to different businesses about how they approach that. The idea that there's an acceptable level of shoplifting is not correct. All shoplifting is shoplifting and is all dealt with by the authorities and by the traders as well. Begging is a persistent issue. In Chorley, we immediately offer support to people who are begging, i.e., why are you begging? Why are you saying you're homeless? We don't. I read a report today across the whole Lancashire around homelessness, and we didn't have a homeless issue compared to lots of other areas because we intervene, and we are fortunate to have space to put people into. So again, we tend to try and deal with that and at a very early point, and therefore reduce the amount of begging that goes on. But people come to Chorley to beg because they see it as an opportunity, and there's less competition, to be quite honest with you. And that's, again, what they feed back to us when we ask them why. The supported living accommodation, there are various accommodation facilities in the borough, but a lot around the town centre, where individuals who require support and rehabilitation and either have drug or alcohol issues or are being rehabilitated on release from prison, etc., are located, and they quite often generate antisocial behaviour on an ad hoc basis associated with those individuals, and that has been quite a big issue recently to deal with that. Okay. It then looks to detail about the actions and interventions that we do. We have constant multi-agency meetings, and they're held fortnightly, and there's also bi-monthly community safety partnership meetings as well. We use enforcement as a last resort. We tend to try and intervene to deal a little bit like we discussed again earlier in the meeting around getting upstream of the problems, because if people are causing antisocial behaviour in our town centre, why are they not in their own homes? Why are they not in their own home area? Is there some reason that they are not wanting to be in their homes or in their home area? And that particularly applies to young people. There is something going on at home that's causing them to be out on the streets late at night, in the early hours, etc. It then details in paragraph 21 the actions that we've taken. So the recent actions, 8 community protection warnings, that's issued to businesses, beggars and shoplifters, and a number of those have been issued to businesses. 4 community protection notices, which are an escalation effectively of the earlier notice. 2 fixed penalties where those notices have been breached, and a closure order that has been in the press, so people will be aware of. And that was our first business closure order, which takes us for 3 months, and then we extended it for a further 3 months. The next point in paragraph 22 is very important about designing out crime. Lancashire Police have a designing out crime officer, because sometimes if you remove the environment, it deals with some of the issues and problems, and businesses have embraced that and benefited as a result. But again, it says about the Real Cinema and Escape Lounge and also the bus station. There are things we can do and business owners can do to reduce the opportunity for antisocial behaviour. And then a major plus for us is our town centre ambassadors, who are very well spoken of by the businesses in the town centre and residents and visitors, including visiting football fans, because what they are is our eyes and ears. They assist the police, they respond to CCTV, they have body-worn cameras, they can record evidence, they do a lot of the chasing around, keeping problem antisocial behaviour situations moving and resolving them as well at an early point, because the police, as we all know, have a needs and a demand-led approach. So if something, a more serious crime is going on, they go and deal with that, so they can't be there 24/7. And our ambassadors are increasingly being used to assist the police alongside PCSOs, who are drafted in by the police, not ones that we pay for, and special police, etc. Which then leads on to Op Centurion, which is the police's attempt to deal with some of this issue, which is providing extra policing patrols in antisocial behaviour hotspots. And Chorley Town Centre is one of those across Lancashire. And I got a report yesterday that told me how many extra hours of policing Op Centurion put into Chorley, which was significant. It was over 100 hours in the last couple of months of extra police presence in the town centre. And a lot of those police are tasked to those hotspots we detailed before, Chapel Street, etc. The way they are doing Op Centurion is basically offering overtime to police and then putting that overtime fixed into those areas. So they're not being paid overtime and then sent on the responsive stuff. They're being offered the overtime and then they stay in the town centre, which is good for us because it tends to be evenings and weekends where the antisocial behaviour occurs. That's when the Op Centurion applies people, and as we saw from the report earlier, that's when a lot of the youth facility that's provided by PNE and the county isn't open, although the youth zone obviously is. And then there's Operation Op Sunshine, which is the council's public protection team, about engaging with those young people who are causing some of the problems. There's the lack of diversion of facilities that we dealt with earlier in the report, in the meeting, and there is a particular teenage cohort at the moment that has been causing problems for a couple of years, probably around and before COVID, and possibly due to other distractions wasn't dealt with at the time, has then gained a certain level of confidence and has obviously encouraged others to approach that. These cohorts come through now and again, and those people who were used to schools and what have you, every so often you just get a problematic cohort. That has happened in Chorley. To be fair, that cohort has now moving on or has been dealt with through orders, banning orders from the town centre, etc. But they've encouraged another group behind them, and that's the group we're dealing with at the moment. And we are working very closely with the Police and Crime Commissioner and his ability to support that programme. A lot of positive engagement going on through the Youth Zone, through the Preston North End Trust, via all kinds of different agencies and operations, including some of the anti-violence teams in Lancashire as well. And I can't remember the name of the JJ, what's it called? Yeah, the JJ Effect, there you go. People like that in the town centre. What we're seeing is where we'd normally seen a spike at the last half-term period, we didn't, and touch wood, it was very quiet over the Christmas period, and that might be down to some of the specific actions we've taken. We will see. It takes more than one swallow to make a summer, so we'll see where that goes. But in order to keep working on this, we need to keep that vigilance up. That's why we've been working on things even as late as this afternoon to try and maintain some of this progress, and happy to answer questions. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. It was really, really informative. Councillor Hayden first.
Just a thought really that's just come into my head. We've had some paperwork recently issued about the Duke of Edinburgh scheme, about it not being as the take-up as popular as it used to be. And if that is something that could be rolled out with the youth work, whether there might be any value in that.
Yes, and I got the same paperwork from them. I was surprised because they used to be very engaged on the used to be, before the youth zone was built, there was a building there prior to that, which was the Arts Partnership, yeah, and Chorley Youth and Arts Partnership, and the Duke of Edinburgh Trust, as it was then, Prince of Wales. That work was done from that building. So they engaged in the youth zone straight afterwards. I think they've become a bit disengaged and now they're re-engaging Councillor Hayden. So I think we will take them up on their offer because there are good programmes that they do. But again, that tends to be before you get to the ASB level, it's in the early engagement to give a positive diversion before they get problems. But yeah, we've forwarded that detail on and we are pushing that programme.
Thank you. Councillor McGovern?
In looking at your time series over 1 year, I felt it would certainly help me to have had a longer time series to see what's happened in the previous years. And the reason is that I can see that if you look at it as a whole, it looks like a slight rise. It's slightly going up. So obviously it may be an issue. And I just thought that if we're talking about antisocial behaviour, looking back to what the sources might be, everything you've said, sounds quite reactive to antisocial behaviour. And I was just thinking that because of COVID, because of increasing poverty, because of educational issues for children and mental health being affected, that it's very reactive, but there's also, I know that you've been talking about proactive, that's been talking about. So I do understand that, but I just wanted to make that comment that actually in tackling this, to tackle it, a problem which isn't resolving is getting worse. Going back to sources and thinking about those proactive actions that can ameliorate the, you know, why are those, if they're young people, why are they?
Yeah, and all those points are valid, Councillor McGovern, and are being trended. So just to explain where the police are on this, as the police are concerned, there is a lot less criminality, and particularly violent criminality, in the town centre than there ever used to be. So 20 odd years ago, there were multiple fights in Chorley town centre, in multiple public houses and on the streets on Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Sunday nights. That doesn't happen anymore. What we see is more low level, usually aggression or incidents happening within smaller groups of people. So whether that is people who are shoplifting because they have a drug habit or an alcohol dependency or whatever it might be, or they're committing antisocial behaviour because they are young people in hoodies and what have you, up to no good, it tends to happen within those, so it doesn't spread to the population. Now, Chorley's very fortunate now at the moment, it's getting quite busier with people coming back into the town centre. Through COVID, it almost stopped because nobody could be out on the streets through the COVID period. So the graph was going along, but the violent stuff's come down. It's that other antisocial behaviour that's gone up. And I think, Councillor McGovern, we perhaps could provide some information that shows that, which is why the police, I think, initially perhaps were slow to respond to the concerns because it was seen to be a low-level irritant. But the problem then is people become a bit emboldened and then you get more significant. And it also, unfortunately, leads to some of the behaviours that we see in larger towns, which is around grooming of young people, young people at risk, all that kind of stuff, who people are then preying on. So the perpetrators of some of that antisocial behaviour actually might be the victims of some of that antisocial behaviour and or criminality. And that's what we are also concerned about at the moment, okay? Because it's that lack of, now we can discuss why there was a lack of policing, police numbers being cut, all that kind of stuff. And I know they're built back up again, but there were some fairly sweeping cuts. There was also sweeping cuts to youth services, to other facilities, etc. And it takes time for that to work through the system. And so therefore, the reasons are many and varied. We're more interested. You can see the action plan. Like I said, it's a part 2 item, but the action plan details lots of activity by lots of people to deal with the issue. There is also a frustration, and I was listening the other night to a discussion on the radio about dealing with particularly youth crime, about how we not criminalising young people, because once they're in the justice system, they tend to stay in the justice system. It's very hard to get out of. So it's a frustration from the population generally. The MP and others have raised it with the Youth Justice Council and Youth Justice teams in Chorley. Why are we not taking action against some of these people? But the general idea is that you try and doing positive work to engage with people to keep them out of the youth justice system, and because that will cost us all a lot of money down the line and cost them their opportunities in life. Unfortunately, within that, there are always a number of people who don't want to change and don't want to get any better, and therefore the perception is that they are then getting away with that, and at which point you intervene is very much a subjective position, and society changes over its time. So discuss.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Any further questions, Councillor Platt?
I think the framework that this has created from it, such as where is it coming from, what are the trigger points, etc. What are the people doing, and what can you do about it? The framework's really good, but it's very town centre, and I just wondered, there are other areas in Chorley, such as the urban service centres and even subsections of urban service centres, such as Buckshaw, which obviously Adi would have loads more information about, and they're easily travelling between there when they step up action into Chorley and vice versa, from travelling out to where they're not being scrutinised to another place such as Buckshaw, because it's just so easy. Is it one stop, I think. I'm just wondering if that framework could be taken, cleaned out, and then just used in different areas, such as a couple of urban service centres that are having as antisocial behaviour, just to see whether there's some very simple steps that can be taken to try to avoid it. I can just think of one coming up in the next few years. We're going to get a similar sort of spread of shops in Claytonley Woods, for example. We're going to have a McDonald's next to a supermarket, next to a car park, next to a leisure centre. That to me is like another storm in a teacup. And if we have something in place to maybe identify what measures you can put in place before that happens, because you've already had experience in Chorley Town Centre, I think it would be a good model to imprint in other places. And can that be done?
Agreed, and it can be done because it has been done. So the Buckshaw one you refer to was linked to the Chorley Town Centre antisocial behaviour and Leyland Town Centre antisocial behaviour. So the reason that the antisocial behaviour started to occur at a spike a year or 18 months ago in Buckshaw was because of displacement from the other two town centres. So the police use the same techniques. The antisocial behaviour that tends to happen in those sort of the urban centres and local centres tends to be more sporadic. It gets dealt with at the time and then it moves on somewhere else, then it comes back. So it's not a constant like it tends to be in the town centre, because it's a smaller geographic area. It's easy to deal with. It's around the Tesco's in Buckshaw, or it's around whatever it might be. So but you're right. And one of the things, to be fair, and I saw Councillor Beach looking when I said about McDonald's, because there's a planning application up in her area at the moment for a McDonald's. Part of that is about, and I think McDonald's in their own flyer that they've put out about it have referred to their security, their antisocial behaviour team, etc. And they have been working quite closely with us. We've been a bit frustrated at times by their aptitude, but they have stepped up. Their operatives, their security use body worn again to capture evidence. They are recording it now in the same way that everybody else is, which is you can scan a QR code. You don't need to know the person's name. You've got the CCTV or take a picture, and you just have a description and a time and log it, and that then becomes better evidence. So a lot of the businesses have been on training and sessions with the police about how they then get that evidence, because it's the same people, whether that's shoplifters or young youths or people with alcohol or drug problems, who are tracking around, and they are migrating around from McDonald's to the bus station to that shop or wherever. So yes, we're already doing it. You're right, we need to do more of it. And it's beholden on the operators as well to buy into that, and they all buy into it at different times in different places, and they need reminding occasionally.
Just to come back, I wasn't suggesting that anywhere else it will be anywhere near the levels of Chorley, because it's a town and it has people being fed in from many different places, but in much larger quantities. It was more that you've come up with a framework that appears to work there, that finds things, identifies things, but then looks for measures to correct them. And that tiny model is what we could just apply on different areas. And even if it's just one small solution, which actually doesn't cost a lot or long term makes a big difference, that's what is important.
Yeah, and therefore, yeah, I agree. And we've got
Right.
it, and Jennifer's that, and part of that is the multi-agency meetings that they have fortnightly. The police have rearranged their community policing, so they also intersect on the town centre, partly to give some of their operatives who cover the rural areas the experience of the town centre operations, so they know what they're looking for and how to do that. So, yeah, it's a work in progress, but we have done it effectively, and we can do it. And I will be looking at Clayton Woods as an example, but to be honest, and on that area, we have the draws for that antisocial behaviour already. Some of those things we put a skate park in, that's a draw for antisocial behaviour at times. There's a big car park there, a lot of activity, lights and all the rest of it, that attracts that behaviours. There's walkways away that you can get away from the area. So
I was just thinking about that one extra thing that you add that makes a big difference to make that draw even more.
I think the word he looked at before is a plan. So what is the plan for that area? What is the plan for the shops in whichever area we're talking about?
Thank you. Any further questions? I had a couple, and I have a couple for part two as well. But for this section, the area I suppose I wanted to draw on listening to your views on this was, I would encourage the council to find out or to seek out opportunities where it can positively share the experiences of the town centre. Because like I say, everybody recalls an incident where there is a negative story, and the response was very good by this council for dealing with that. But that tends to stick with people a lot longer. Negative experiences do than positive ones. So where there's opportunity or scope to just talk positively about the town centre without it being specifically, we're running this event, we're doing this, well, would possibly help mitigate where sometimes when there is an unfortunate circumstance that people understand it's a one-off rather than that's the only time they ever hear something, whether that is about using the ambassadors if they're a really good part of it and people don't realise we have them and the kind of programmes and work we do, there's maybe scope. There'll be people who have better ideas than this than me, but I just thought sometimes people forget to talk about the good things they do. They only respond to the negative stuff sometimes. And I think the other area I wanted to just talk about was, we talked a little bit about designing out issues, and I think that has been useful elsewhere in other parts, but what work do we do to try and prevent it being designed in? I don't know whether it's a question but before items get to planning in pre-consultation, or what, it'd be easier to fix there and surely we'll get to the end place quicker, I think.
Agreed and noted. So on the first one, we do get positive stories, and the fact that Chorley, even the police inspector who's just moved on from Chorley, said Chorley in a briefing to all Lancashire, Chorley is a really busy, vibrant, prosperous town. Lots of people go there for a night out because it's such a nice place to go. That's a policeman saying that, who knows all the problems. So that's his perception, because they have far bigger problems in Preston, in Lancaster, in Accrington, etc. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up. We have problems, but we are not seen by most people as a town with a particular problem. It's a specific issues. So yes, you're right. And I will refer you to the other week we got a letter from a football fan who came here, and I know many people say we don't want football fans in Chorley Town Centre. What he said was, they came here, it was the nicest place they'd ever been on a trip to watch a football match. It was really pleasant, it was a welcoming. The ambassadors met them on the coach, took them to the pub, escorted them back again. That was to avoid any interface with the shoppers, obviously. But said, what a great place. We'll be back again. And we're like, whoa. But you know what I mean? That we get those endorsements. Now we can make most of that, but sometimes you've got to be careful about what that then brings. So I think most the reputation is quite good generally, but what people note is their experience when they come. So you can't tell them it's great and then it not be great. It's got to be great and then be great when they come. So we've got to do that work to do that. The second point around designing out of stuff, yes, we learn lessons. You always learn lessons from what you do. We do things, we try things, and perhaps we need to change things. And we are more conscious now about that designing out. We're also more conscious about good quality CCTV, about the way that the operators work with the police, and that's why they're co-located, about blind alleys and gates in the town centre as well to block things off. So we have paid for alley gates in the town centre to deliberately stop rat runs effectively for people to get away, so they can be watched, they can be patrolled, they can be what have you. And again, we now employ our town centre security for Market Walk, which is ideal, but they now extend over a wider period to protect the whole of the town centre. And that doesn't mean they can stop things happening because they haven't got those powers. They are not the police, but they are there to respond and witness and record who is doing it, because in reality, a lot of this crime and such behaviour is being done by people who are already known elements, and what we just need is the evidence to take appropriate action. And what we really need is the evidence to get upstream and stop them doing that in the first place. So there's lots to it, but yeah, we are getting a lot better at that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Any further questions, colleagues? Well, we're at the end of the discussion on this item. Please can we note the report? Somewhere, I just need to find the wording to move into part 2. So unless anybody's got any further questions for the public part, I'd just like to move what is listed as item 13 and read out the resolution so we can move into private session. Thank you. To consider the following resolution, that the press and public be excluded from the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 7 of part 1 of Schedule 12A to Local Government Act 1972. Is that approved? Thank you. I must now ask any members of the public or press to leave the meeting